Hi guys, today we're going to do a quick history lesson. So I want you to write today's date please. It's Monday the 11th of January 2021 and our learning objective today is to understand the role of slaves in ancient Rome. Now I know we've done quite a lot on ancient Rome, so we're just going to develop our knowledge a little bit more and add some extra things to what we know. So please pause the video, write down the date and objective and then press play when you're ready to move on. So, Roman society is what we're focusing on today. So in Roman society, people weren't seen as equals. So today, our focus is that everybody's equal, everybody should be treated the same, whereas in Roman society, that wasn't the case at all. You were either a citizen, a non-citizen, or a slave. Now, as you can imagine, the people who were treated the worst were the slaves, and the people that were treated the best were the citizens. So, Roman slavery. Most Romans accepted slavery. They just took it in stride. They said, okay, I'm a slave. Slaves could be men, women, girls or boys, so anybody could be a slave. If you had been captured in battle, it was likely that you may have been made to become a slave. You were then sent back to Rome and sold. So if they'd caught you in a battle, they could make you a slave, they'd send you to Rome, and then they'd sell you to people who would buy you to make you do different jobs for them. Abandoned children were taken as slaves, so if you weren't at home with your grown-ups or you didn't have anybody in your family left over, then you would be a slave as a child. Sometimes fathers could even choose to sell their older children into the slave trade if they were desperate for money. So if some people were really desperate for money and they had nothing, they could sell one of their children and say, I'll give you my child as a slave if you give me some money because they need to survive. So slaves were bought and sold at a slave market. So like we would have like a food market or anything like that, or a clothes market, they would have a slave market. So there'd be a place just to go and buy slaves. Their individual prices depended on their skills and talents. So for example, a slave that could cook would be more expensive than a slave that couldn't cook. So if you could do more things, you would be worth more money. Whereas if you were someone that couldn't really do anything, then you weren't worth a lot of money. So as a slave, having important skills could be your ticket to better treatment from your master. So that's what they call the person who bought the slave, that was their master. So if you were a really good slave, you did lots of really good things and you were really useful, they might treat you a lot better than if you couldn't really do much. Age also played a massive part in the slave prices. So the younger slaves were usually more expensive because a lot of the time they were stronger and fitter than the older people, because a lot of the time the older people were really weak and they couldn't really do anything. So life as a Roman slave. Life wasn't easy for slaves, so they were seen as the property of their master and they had no rights, so they couldn't control anything. Some masters treated their slaves very harshly. So as you can see on the picture, the boy that's on the floor, he's a slave and he's very, very scared. He's blocking his face. So what do we think is going to happen? He's probably going to get beaten, isn't he? So some worked in homes of the rich and had jobs like cleaning, washing, dressing their master and making the meals. So they had basic jobs like that. Gladiators. So most gladiators were slaves who were taught to fight. So these are the gladiators here, and they used to go in the amphitheatre, which is this big building here, the big round building that we looked at, and they used to go in there and fight. They could win their freedom by fighting successfully in the amphitheatre. So if the slave won, then they could be free. Usually, if they didn't win, it's not that they just didn't win, they were usually killed. So a lot of the time, being a gladiator was very dangerous because if you lost your fight, you probably lost your life as well. So, read the letter below and think about what you might put in a letter of reply to the slave. So just read it. I'm going to read it to you and then I want you to have a think. Dear Mum, how are you? It's been so long since I heard your voice. I think about you all the time and I hope that you're safe and well. The home I live in is beautifully decorated with patterned furniture and painted walls. My own space to sleep is a great deal different from this. I curl up at night very tight in a ball to keep myself warm. The food is basic. Anything left by the family is what I eat. I serve the children their food, desperately hoping for their delicious scraps. I even sucked a pigeon bone dry the other day. Please write to tell me of your news and your health. Love always, Romulus. So this Romulus, this slave, is writing this letter to his mum. He's telling his mum that the house that he works in is beautiful, it's lovely, they've got loads of things, but then where he has to sleep is really empty, it's cold, it's horrible. He doesn't really get fed. Any food that's left over is what he eats. He had to suck a bone dry to get a little bit of food off it the other day. It's just terrible, terrible conditions. So I want you to think and I want you to jot down some things about what you've learned from what we know slaves lived like in ancient Roman times. So it's pause the video, jot down a few ideas now, please. So, your task. As a child living in the year 2021, I want you to think about how your life is completely different compared to a slave child living in the ancient Roman times. Your job is to write a letter similar to the one that we've just read about your life, okay? You need to think about what questions you'd ask this slave. So maybe you'd ask them, what kind of jobs do you have to do? Are you treated nicely? Do you get beaten? Have you got any friends? Do you live with your family? Are your family in a different family now? I want you to think what you would tell them about your life. So what you would say, what do? You go to school, you have a family, you have a house, you get fed, you've got clothes, you're comfortable, things like that. Maybe you could tell them about the situation that we're in now. Normally I would be in school with all my friends, but at the minute I'm having to do school at home. What other things would you talk about? So I want you to think about that. Remember, there's some points down the side. Start your letter with Dear Romulus, because that's who you're writing to. Don't forget to put your comma and then go on to the next line. Use paragraphs to separate your writing. I want you to use at least 2 paragraphs in your writing, please. I want you to make it as descriptive as possible. End your letter by saying who it's from. So, love from whoever or just from whoever. And do not forget your capital letters and full stops, please. So you can pause the video to make sure you know what you're doing. And then that's it for today. Well done, everybody. That was a beautiful history lesson, and I will see you soon.